With you this morning. Those of us that are joining us online, good to see you here as well. Last week we did a survey, if you guys remember this, if you were here, and we asked quite a few questions, but I pulled a couple of those questions out that were just really encouraging to me. And we'll put one of them up on the screen here. We'll see another one a little later on. But this question was, have you invited an unbelieving friend or neighbor to a service last year? And I just thought this was great, all right? Overall, 50% of us said, yeah, you know what? I care enough about, I have enough relationship with somebody that I'm going to invite them to come and hear more about the hope that I have in Jesus. And 25%, you can see on there, you asked your friend, you asked your neighbor, and they said yes. So that means we've had people here over this last year who've been introduced to Jesus Christ in this way. That is tremendous. But I also want to honor as well those people that asked and their friend just said no. You know what? We can't help that, can we? God is going to work how God is going to work in people's hearts. We just have to be willing to take that step. So I'm proud to be part of a church that 50% of the people said, yeah, you know what? I'm going to get in the game. I'm going to be a part of this, and I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to be part of reaching out to my friends and neighbors and building relationships in that way. Let's continue to walk this pathway and see what God does. Now, speaking of pathway, Mark has mentioned to us, we're in this new series. It's actually a continuation of the book of Mark, but Jesus begins his journey to the cross. He's on the road to the cross here, and we are going to walk with him. And today, Jesus wants to transform our view of greatness. Now, in history, there have been over 142 people that have called themselves the Great. I don't know how you get this title, if you give it to yourself or what, but can you think of anybody who was called the Great? All right, think of a few. Okay, I don't know if you're raising your hand because you are the Great. Maybe you're one of the 142. Herod the Great, Catherine the Great, Alexander the Great, short man, had his hand inside his vest. Napoleon the Great. But there's only one guy I know of that called himself the greatest. All right, do you know who the greatest is? This guy might have been one who would float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. Yeah, he has this great quote, "It's hard to be humble when you're as great as I am." Of course, Muhammad Ali. But now, is this the type of greatness that Jesus has for us here? How is Jesus going to help us understand greatness? Now, I think that we should be great. We are created in the image of God. We already have this greatness inside of us here. We long to be significant. We long to make our lives count. There's no sort of kid or ever say, when I grow up, I just want to lazily float down the cesspool of life, Kids, teenagers, they have this desire to be great. No kid wants to grow up and be unnoticed. No kid wants to grow up and say, I want to be insignificant. We have this desire to be great. And that's where Jesus wants to come and help. He's going to call us to something that's a little bit counterintuitive, a little bit countercultural, not just a little bit, a lot, but to humility and servanthood. You want to be great in God's kingdom, Jesus is saying, then you need to learn to be the servant of all. And that's where we get our big idea today. Give up your life to serve. If you want greatness in the kingdom, we have to walk through suffering and be servants. Whoever finds his life will lose it, Jesus said, but whoever loses it for my sake will find it. Now, as we've seen Jesus in the book of Mark so far, he keeps dashing the disciples' expectations of what they think he's going to do. He's the Messiah. They know this. They've admitted this, but they think that he is going to take the throne by force. He's going to come in, he's going to crush the Romans. But Jesus isn't aiming for this, and he's told them multiple times. Jesus didn't come to rule and to reign. He came to deliver and to die. Jesus didn't come to conquer and kill. He came to suffer and to save. And if the greatest life was spent serving, we would be wise to live like this. If you want to impact people, if you want to impact your kids and your grandkids, You should follow Jesus in what he does. If you want to impact your workplace, your school, your neighborhood, then following the example of the man who has the most impact in human history would be a wise thing to do. If you want to transform your marriage relationship, then you should seek to serve your spouse as Jesus served others. If you want to live a life of significance, then you should mirror the life of the most significant man who ever walked. And he said, whoever seeks to find his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Well, let's look at the cost of servanthood. Jesus is leading his disciples well. He's trying to understand the road, the pathway that they're on here, but they're not quite getting it yet. He's on his way to the cross. And so in verse 32, it says, they were on their way up to Jerusalem with Jesus leading the way, and the disciples were astonished. Last time he was in town, things didn't go well. They're astonished that Jesus is on his way again, while those who followed were afraid. Then he took the 12 aside, and he told them what was going to happen to them. He said, we're going to go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests, the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles, who will mock him, spit on him, flog him, and kill him. 3 days later, he will rise. So now Jesus had told them what's going to happen when they go up to Jerusalem. Not just now in this, but 2 times before this, actually in the 2 previous chapters. He keeps telling them what's going to happen over and over again, and yet they're still surprised. They must think he's talking in code or something, but he's trying to lay it out for them. Jesus says, my life is going to be a sacrifice. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to lay it out for you. Jesus isn't going to get crucified by accident. He is embracing it. It says in Luke chapter 9, verse 51, that he set his sights. He resolved to go to Jerusalem because he knew he was going to give up his life there. And Mark tells us specifically that Jesus knew what was going to happen. 8 specific prophecies here in this passage. Not only does Jesus know what's going to happen, but he knows this from the Old Testament because he's read it over and over again. He says, we're going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will, 1, be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. 2, they will condemn him to death. 3, they're going to deliver him to the Gentiles. 4, they're going to mock him. 5, they're going to spit on him. 6, they're going to flog him. 7, they're going to kill him. And then 8, after 3 days, he's going to rise again. So Jesus walks towards Jerusalem where he anticipates death. This is the road. This is the pathway that he's on. And we're going to walk this with him over the next few weeks. But Jesus predicted his death. So this is no accident of history. Jesus knew this was happening. And we should recognize from this that we cannot come to Jesus without the cross. We can't come to Jesus without the cross. This is what it is going to cost us. And Jesus was clear about this, and he's been clear about this as he's walked through this. Back in Mark chapter 8, verse 34, he said, then calling the crowd to join the disciples, he said this, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross, and follow after me. You cannot come to Jesus without the cross. Now, at the time, his followers thought this was incredible. They couldn't believe this. Right? They didn't understand this. And many people in our day and age, they can't understand this as well. But Jesus wants to make this clear today. The cross is the center of our faith, and we need to be ready to give up our lives for Jesus. Give up your life to serve him. Give up your life to serve those that he loves. And the way of greatness in the kingdom is through suffering.